Ready?
And just a question, because the camera is not really on. I think
No,
it's,
it won't move.
it won't move. Okay, that's right.
C'è il campo lato.
Yeah, I mean, you can move it with that. But
No, it's no, just to
io lo
because
sapevo
it's not
fare
you
perché
so we're ready here.
Vedete, meglio che non stampi
They start.
Let me answer that one.
Okay. So welcome to the discussion panel, Climate Crisis, Science, Communication and Politics, promoted by the Union for the Mediterranean and by the Italian Public Broadcasting Service. Gramenos Mastroianni, diplomat, professor, writer, you are the director of the Union. What science can play a role in politics?
Well, first of all, thank you very much and welcome to the Mediterranean House at COP28. This is a pavilion, a virtual pavilion that hosts a coalition of 10 partners, all engaged in finding a good future for our Mediterranean region. Science, in the case of the Mediterranean, has been totally crucial. The Mediterranean is in a strange situation because it is indeed a climate hotspot. The second fastest warming region in the world. The waters of the Mediterranean are the fastest warming, and connected with these measurements, there are some predicted impacts which are sincerely scary. But this is not the point. The fact is that at the same time, the Mediterranean has always been a sea of conflicts where the different states didn't really recognize in each other. And on top of that, all the climate issues are considered politically within the COP. In the COP, the Mediterranean does not exist. The Mediterranean region is actually divided in 3 negotiation groups that are generally opposing on the main issues. So we could not exist until science intervened. At a certain point, also due to our backing, a voluntary group of scientists released a report, 2019, called the MAR1 report. This group of scientists is called the MEDEC, that showed precisely how we all share the same destiny around this scheme. This information, precise, proven, kickstarted a series of political processes which are absolutely extraordinary. First, it gave a legitimation for the Mediterranean to be present at the COP. We are not negotiators as such, but we are one of the strongest observers and advocacy leaders in this COP, and we can bring a message. We are the Mediterranean. It's similar to what the islands did. The islands are like us. They're very disparate. They're in different oceans. They belong to different negotiation groups, CARICOM rather than G77, whatever you want, but they recognized that they had a common interest, that they had the same problems, and so they exerted a very effective pressure in the COP, one that changed the course of the negotiation. Now, due to science making it clear that we have a Mediterranean community around the challenge of climate, not only we have a reason to be united at the COP, but something magical, really magical started. States which were in principle opposing started to recognize that they have a common interest. And this, in turn, opened the way to a series of negotiations, practical solutions, cooperation networks that places the Mediterranean way beyond the point at which negotiations in the COP are. We arrived to a conclusion, and this is our approach, that would have not been possible without science showing us that we all share the same problem. And the methodology, the conclusion based on science that we adopted and is working very well is the following. Around the Mediterranean, there are strong and weak groups, richer and poorer states, but nobody, not even the richest, had enough means to face a crisis of this magnitude and pace. But if we take those differences that in the past made us have tensions and disputes, you realize that we have a larger basket of solutions. We just have to put them together, and we have a much higher resilience and resistance and change power. Two very easy examples. Energy. The European Union wants to decarbonize by 2050, but it is quantitatively impossible without relying on the solar power, on the solar potential on the South Shore, and on the wind potential of the Balkans. In turn, those sectors cannot really develop if they only rely on internal markets. They would not have enough finance. You join the dots. We have a plan which is flying, which is together we can. Same thing is happening in agriculture, more silently. You know, in roughly 10, 15 years' time, Southern Europe will have a climate that we don't know. But it's a climate that has been known and managed by South Shore Mediterraneans during 5,000, 6,000 years. We need the know-how. We also need the phytogenetic heritage of the sites. In practice, those plants, both in forestry and agriculture, that are viable and productive now on the South Shore, could be the plants, the heritage that can save our agricultures and economies in a very near future. It might sound a little bit abstract, but let me give you just an example. If you're familiar with the wine and vine sector, there is a very rapid migration to the north of the different kinds of grapes. We're already talking about producing, I don't know, champagne in Sweden. This might be happening, but the know-how, if you want to produce champagne, is still in France. And if you want to produce cava, it's still in Spain, or Prosecco, it's still in Italy. All this cross-contaminates and makes us see, and actually already run quite quickly, quicker than the pace of negotiation, the proper plan that says, together we can. All we need to do is recognize that differences are not a reason to be opposed one to the other, but to be stronger all together. All this, which is the mark of the Mediterranean, it's a message that we're bringing to the COP, would have not been possible without the scientists voluntarily gathering together. They were not paid to draft a report that says, guys around the world, the Mediterranean is a climate hotspot and we have to face it all together. Thank you.
Thank you, Gramenos Mastroianni, one of the director of the Unions of Mediterranean. And let's go to introduce Andrea Ghianda, Head of Communication of ECHO, the Italian climate think tank. So climate change denial was good information and communication. This is really a big issue. What's the best way to communicate effectively the climate change issues now?
Thank you, Claudia, and thank you for the invitation to this interesting conversation on communication. As a communication expert, I would like to focus on the narrative that we see around climate change, mostly in the media. And apologies if I keep my phone on, but I have a few notes, so I'm not checking the notes. I'm actually just following the notes. The question here is, I think, when does the media talk about climate change and how they do it? Most of the time, we see that the media discuss climate change when there is a natural disaster, a flood, a drought, something that raises the interest of the public, because the public is looking for answers on that. And normally, what happens is that the public is looking for someone to blame. And normally the blame goes to the local administrator, to the government, because they did not enough to prevent something that could have been prevented. And so I think it's difficult to link the narrative to the real causes of climate change. because you just focus on the immediate need. And the immediate need in COP is called adaptation. So what can you do to prepare a territory, a region to adapt to the change that is brought by the rising temperature? And the narrative obviously goes in that direction, and that's why you see that kind of conversation. But if the climate change narrative would be a novel of an Agatha Christie novel, I mean, the smoking gun, it's pretty obvious to see. I mean, and it's the burning of oil, gas, and coal. This is the real cause of rising temperature and climate change, and it's not Echo, it's not myself saying that. It's the entire community of scientists on climate change that is telling us with an urgent need that this is the real cause and we need to do something about that. But it's also true that when you have the water at your knees, when your house is falling down, you don't think about that. You don't want to be told that you need to change your car. You need to change your habits. You need to change the way you cook your meal, the way you keep you make your home warm. It's very difficult for you to make that connection. You just want to say why that river wasn't in my house, was close to the river, and now why I'm in this situation. So I think what we need to do, what media must do, is to link mitigation with adaptation, which is going really to the causes of climate change. Of course, you cannot do that during a climate disaster because, as we said before, people are not ready for that kind of conversation. So that's why the discussion on climate change must go much beyond climate. Discussion on climate change must include economy, society, political industries. The way we define our future, we need to look at how we want to live in 20, 50 years, how our children will have to live, which habits, which kind of society will have to live. And the way we define today these policies will define the way they will live in the future. So the conversation in the media should not only be focused on the immediate and the disaster that happened, but should be constant, and the link should be made between economic experts and scientists in order to have a narrative that can combine the two. If we look at the main strategy that we have now at national level to reduce emissions, is the plan, the energy and climate plan. And if you look into that plan, we're not talking about climate only. We're talking about the way we live in our buildings with energy efficiency, the way we move, we transport, the way we define our energy strategy, the way we define our industrial strategy for the next 50, 20 years. And we need to look at it in a perspective that shows not only the negative side, who's going to bear the cost of that transition, but which are the real opportunities on that. And if you see the real opportunities are not only something that you can see at national level. If you see the strategy, for instance, of the United States with the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which says we must focus on the technology of the transition. The European Green Deal of Industrial Plan says the same thing. We should focus on that kind of transition. So that's why we should focus a narrative that goes beyond climate and embrace the real transformation that this society needs. Of course, considering all the costs and the challenges, but also highlighting which are the opportunities that can come there. And I conclude by saying that, of course, journalists and media experts should be trained on that. So I think we should work much more on get them prepared on what are the narratives, and also to follow the science. And science is not only the climate scientists, but it's also economists, independent economists. Otherwise, if you follow the narratives only of the politics and the private sector, you risk to have a narrative which is influenced by private interest or interests which are not the interest of society.
And I have a question based on your experience as a journalist and communicator. Why the climate change appears to be the elephant in the room? So there is, but nobody wants to see it.
Well, I think the problem is that it's difficult to make that kind of connection between what can you do and the impact that you can make when you see that probably your actions are not enough. Because then you have big countries that are producing and you say, okay, but I'm a little person, you know, I do my life. How can my life can impact on that? So I think that's the difficult, and the media should be able to show that this can in fact make a difference. So this is very important. And there is also another element that I want to highlight, that is sometimes the format of TV, newspapers, when you have two ideas, one in front of another, you consider those ideas as equal. But most of the time, they're not. If you have someone which is advocating what the science is saying, this person has behind the entire community of scientists, which, you know, prove that what he's saying is right. On the other side, you have an opinion. But on TV, on the papers, for the public, these are seen as two ideas. And these risk to polarize the public in two sides, one against another, when in fact, the majority of the people, they have reasonable doubt about the transition. And the narrative of the media should go in that direction, trying to answer which are the reasonable doubts that you may have on the transition, and not trying to polarize more of the people.
Thank you, Andrea. And one example could be also talking about best practice. Should be Alessandro Macina. Hello, ciao Alessandro.
Hi, colleagues. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Alessandro Macina is a reporter from Presa Diretta, which is a RAI really good audience program. So you covering a lot of issues, among them also climate change and environmental problems. But before starting with you, I think we can also have a look to the last.
Yes, I agree.
From Alessandro.
Il riciclo sarà l'industria strategica del futuro elettrico. Per ora in Italia c'è solo un impianto che ricicla batterie al litio. È frutto dell'intuizione di un imprenditore veneto già attivo nel settore rifiuti, che 10 anni fa ha comprato negli Stati Uniti la tecnologia da impianti esistenti e ha brevettato un sistema per riciclare i preziosi minerali presenti nei nostri oggetti portatili, dai telefonini ai PC ai tablet.
Questa è una bike classica, vengono smontate, ogni singola cella contiene 12 grammi, in questo caso 15 grammi di litio cobalto ossido.
Queste sono batterie delle auto?
Sì, arrivano già da 2 anni, 3 anni, per esempio Stellantis, il gruppo Fiat Iveco, ci spedisce un carico ogni mese più o meno.
Questo è un impianto di cosiddetto pretrattamento, vuol dire che da ogni singola cella delle batterie si ricava polvere catodica, la cosiddetta black mass contenente i minerali, compreso il litio.
Tiro fuori circa 15 tonnellate al mese di prodotto finito, quindi sono 4 tonnellate di cobalto, 5 e circa 1,5 tonnellate di litio.
Una vera e propria miniera di litio, di cui oggi, senza una filiera del riciclo batterie, non sappiamo che farcene in Italia. E così viene rivenduto tutto in Nord America e in Asia.
Questo va in Sud Corea. Ho avuto richieste proprio in settimana anche del mercato cinese.
E naturalmente lo vendete tutto?
Sì, e avrei richieste per almeno 3 o 4 volte tanto. Stanno arrivando dei grossi gruppi industriali dall'America, ma anche dalla Cina, per poter raccogliere i rifiuti europei e italiani per poi trasferirli nei loro paesi.
Esatto,
quindi
fare
sicuramente devono riportarsi a casa la batteria. E quindi non è più bisogno di comprare litio o cobalto.
Ci vogliono la black mass, perché con altri processi di trattamento si ritorna a questo, il litio in purezza, con cui fare nuove.
So this reportage was in Italian, but we saw batteries, and we are talking about recycling the waste. What remains of the green energy, basically. So what's your experience from this point of view?
Yeah, sorry for the Italian language of the video, but now I'm talking about this. Just a brief introduction. Yeah, I realized several TV reports across the world about climate and the ecological transition at Presa Diretta, that is a leading primetime news program of RAI, we produce long-length reports. And 6 years ago, we started explaining climate science to a primetime audience. Today, we talk more and more about ecological transition. And as a journalist, my keywords now are debunking and fact-checking. Why? Because there is, as we know, a huge debate around the ecological transition. We may say against the ecological transition and its cost, the jobs we will lose, its environmental impact. And people need to know if it's true or not. So that's why fact-checking, because I think an objective fact-checking can show with facts and figures that the transition is not our problem, it's our biggest opportunity. 1 year ago, I talked about the slow growth of renewables in Italy. It is not possible to run only with renewables, we used to say. The reality is that in Italy, it takes an average of 6 years to authorize a new renewable plant. 6 years, when it takes a few months to install it. This means that when you finally have all the authorizations, you are installing an older technology, considering the steps forward that are made every year. And if you want to update your project with new technology, you lose another 2 years with the new permissions. Another thing, another fake news is often said, we cannot change our beautiful landscape, world famous landscape with renewables. Of course, it is so important to govern, to rule the process and control it, but there is no need to fill the Italian landscape. Technologies are more and more efficient. If 10 years ago, 3 wind turbines were needed, today, 1 is enough to have the same energy. And the same for solar panels. There are trackers that follow the sun automatically to collect as much light as possible, double-sided panels that also collect the albedo, and then Italian factory makes them. And to be independent, do you know how much surface area the country is needed? 1% of our unused agricultural soils, 1%. So the reality, after this fact checking, is that we waste time, we make renewables lose time, but at the same time, we are buying gas for the next 20, 30 years. Countries very similar to us, Spain and Portugal, are doing the opposite. We showed this to the audience. Of course, it is possible to use less and less fossil energy. In October, then, we talked about the most discussed aspect of the ecological transition, that is mobility, electric cars. It may seem obvious that we need to change our way to move, but it's not. And electric cars are at the center of the debate on raw materials for the energy transition. We need mining. Yes, it is true. And it is right to ask not to move from one dependency to another, from oil to critical metals. But number one, there are so many fake news about raw materials. Let's take just one, cobalt. Cobalt is less and less a problem in electric cars because the chemistry that is winning is another one. It's lithium iron phosphate. For example, the most famous car maker used these batteries without cobalt. On the contrary, cobalt continues to be inside our cell phones, in the laptop from which I'm speaking now. And why? Because cobalt is important for the portable devices. But we don't care this cobalt. We are only interested in the one for electric cars. Second, we need to consider the life cycle. The ecological transition has the possibility to be a circular economy. We'll never have the same with oil. We burn it and we need more and more. Lithium, on the other hand, does not finish in the batteries. It remains inside the battery even when after 10, 15 years, it is no longer needed for the car. And then the battery can have a second life as storage, and that's another 8-15 years. The Amsterdam Stadium energy storage system is made from old car batteries, and the Fiumicino Airport is doing the same and will become independent in 1 year with solar panels and battery storage from car battery, of course. Third, after the second life or after the car use, we have recycling, what that is the video was about. I can recover the lithium and make other batteries with that. According to the Polytechnic of Milan, it is a 6 billion euro economy by 2030 for Europe. But in Italy, as we have seen in this brief video, there is only one small recycling plant, and every month it ships tons of lithium and other recycled metals back to America and China and Asia. That's because in Italy, we don't believe in the electric car economy. It's a paradox again. We worry about lithium mining, but every month, we send a lithium mine outside Italy. Fourth, we have research. The European batteries goal is to be recycled and to use less critical materials. There is a law and there is a project for this. It's called Battery 2030. The reality is that everyone is looking for new materials, less criticals, and sodium batteries, sodium-ion batteries, sodium, the one we have in the salt, without lithium, of course, are almost ready, to be industrialized. So when we talk about ecological transition, we cannot say that all this possibility doesn't exist and only talk about the costs of the transition and not also calculate the opportunities. In the transition, we have an alternative, we have a solution, we have research, we can have circularity. In today's status quo, unfortunately not. And this is why when we talk about transition, the comparison with oil, that is the elephant in the room, that is our past and our present, is not optional, it is mandatory. Because oil, I can only extract and burn it. Extract, and when I burn, I have lost it for millennia. And I need always more of it in an infinite loop. Oil is in the hands of a few people. I will never be able to produce it by myself, and I'll never have a gasoline pump station at home. On the contrary, I can produce renewable energy by myself with the sun and have a wall box in the garage, or I can be inside a renewable energy community. In the transition, energy is democratic, but it's not only this. It is true that oil brought the world out the cave. It built the global world we have around us, the global economy we have around us. But it's also true that after 150 years of oil and gas drilling, we need a cleaner, more sustainable, and efficient world. Efficient, and we found more efficient, cleaner, and sustainable technologies, and they are also competitive from an economic point of view. A traditional car, in the best scenario, has an efficiency of 40%, but on average, it's only 20%. It means that when I fill up my car, I don't need 60-80% of the fuel I feel, because I lose it as heat inside a combustion engine. It also means that I also waste at least 60% of how much I pay for gasoline. The electric car, on the contrary, has an efficiency of 80%. So let's ask ourselves not only who has an interest in making the transition, but as a journalist, I am also interested to know who has an interest in not making it, in blocking it or slowing it. And to conclude, I think the answer is right around you in Dubai. A final figure that may help. In Italy, around 90%. Yeah.
No, I don't want to interrupt, but I want to ask you if do you think that Italy has a future for recycling?
Yes, of course, it can have. We must have, because we don't have lithium mines. We need to find lithium. We have to extract it. So it's a very long process, and also a difficult process, also an environmental difficult process. So one of our best opportunities is, of course, to recycle, but not only as I was saying, recycling is important, but on the other hand, Europe is working very hard to find new materials. We know, all the world knows that we cannot substitute the dependency of oil with the dependency of lithium. So in all the research centers in Europe, and not only Europe, they are searching for new materials that are more available, less critical, and we are close to find a good alternative. For example, the sodium-ion battery that is already used with success in storage can also have a future research, say, in cars. So in a few days, actually, I'm traveling to the north of Europe, where this research is very forward, and also to show what can we do with recycle. I think that people need to know and to see that we have an alternative, that the ecological transition can be a circular economy, and this for me is the most important difference with the status quo, with the actual model. Yeah.
Thank you, Alessandro. So let's go ahead with talking about communication, because we are with Alessandra Stolfi, Global Exhibition Director, Green and Technology Division of the Italian Exhibition Group. So you are really worldwide, and you go in any place, you went in any place. What is the most important way to communicate about the effects on ecological transition, but based on your experience as director of this entity, which is organizer events?
Yes, thank you, Claudia. Thank you to the organizer for giving me this opportunity to explain, like a private group, like Italian Exhibition Group, can giving the crucial debate on information and communication in the climate change problem. First of all, just a few words about Italian Exhibition Group. Is a provider of exhibition and events in Italy and worldwide, as you told before, in different sectors: food, beverage, jewelry, hospitality, tourism, and green technology. And green technology is my field with Ecomondo and the energy. Especially Ecomondo is the main international events in both at the European level and in the Mediterranean area, in the green and circular economy, as before mentioned Alessandro, which bring together all the best technologies, services, and industrial solutions for the ecological transition. What we did in these 26 years, we understand the role that a so big fair can play in disseminating the environmental protection and the culture and innovative culture on environmental friendly production model. because before Andrea explained how it's important to combine not only climate change discussion, but economical change discussion, because we have to change a culture and a mentality. What we do through Ecomondo, we put together in the same place a big community, a very huge community composed by scientists, economists, students, association, industries, all types.
The real world.
Yes, the real world all together to design the guideline of the fair. So in our fair, we can express what is useful for the society. So I think that the strongness of Ecomondo is to highlight that we have the best technologies are available for changing the situation. And sometimes, as Andrea told before, the problem is some private interest, some lobbies that put some obstacle to this transition. But the transition is right on the track. So I think that Ecomondo is really a place where we can touch with your hand that more than 2,000 companies, Europe and also Italy and Europe companies, have the best solution. And we are a virtual countries in terms of circular economy, because we are poor of raw material, and so we are able to recycle all kind of materials, all kind of waste, compared to other economies. For example, from Germany, we are at the best position compared to Germany, to France, to Spain, to Poland, and sometimes it's not so easy to communicate our value. So it's very important to communicate how our country is able to do that. This is the first example. Then I want to go to another example that we did in the last edition, because Ecomondo organized 230 conferences, but also every year the State General of the Green Economy, promoted by the Ministry of the Minister of Environment and Energy Security. And in this last report we presented in Ecomondo in November, we look at the ecological transition from a different perspective. That is, that economic benefit of the ecological transition are higher than cost associated of the transition itself. So we demonstrate that we mentioned in the report that decarbonization of the Italian economy entails an annual cost of 14.7 billion euros in the 2020-2030 period, but generates direct saving of 6.6 billion euros per year and stimulates an industry that brings additional revenues and new jobs and new green jobs for young people.
So meaning that ecology makes profits.
Yes. So it's very important to explain a different perspective, because the storytelling sometimes is that with the ecological transition we lose jobs, we lose privilege, we will become poor, and it is not real the real storytelling. So I think it's very important to have a report, scientists, and good communication for explain what really we can do. And the second example is the young generation, because, for example, in Ecomondo, we also dedicated a special attention to the young millennials, focusing on the new green job and linked to ecological transition, because sometimes there is a big gap between schools and training and the companies and the world, the real world. So we dedicated a long program addressed to youth, and involving over 3,000 students during the 4 days in Rimini. And I think getting the youth involved is essential, since the present situation is made of extreme activism on one end and moral disengagement of the other end. So there is really, yes, again. I give you just a number. 87% of young people claim for more information, but they don't know which sources they should rely on, given the complexity of environmental issue, because it is very difficult to explain why nuclear is good or is better energy efficiency, or is better recycling, or is better to combine different items. So it is really difficult. Yes. So young are sometimes, the risk is that people may not fully understand the actual contribution they can give to improve the serious situation. So what I can do in my own and little life, like you explained before. So this is very important, because we have to be all engaged. The young, the citizen, the businessman, the government, the agency, every together. Like we demonstrate with the COVID-19, we combat the COVID only together, not a singular stage. This is, for me, very, very clear. And this is the role that Ecomondo and my group try to contribute to this result, to this goal.
United is better than Andrea Vianda, ecco, think tank. Do you think there is a gap in communication talking about youth, young people?
Yes, if I may, I wanted to add something to what Alessandro said before about debunking and fact checking, which I think it is, we should make a reality check. And I wanted to give you an example of what's happening in the narrative around COP. Saturday, 22 countries signed a commitment to triple nuclear energy by 2050, and we made the headline in Italy. Everybody was talking about that, although nuclear power in Italy is not in our energy and climate plan. You know, the plan, which will be sent to the European Commission in June 2024, it doesn't include energy, nuclear energy in the mix of Italy for 2050. On top of that, Italy at G7 level took the commitment to produce electricity only by renewables by 2035. So the reality check means that why should I talk about that if it's not part of my strategy? At the same time, a few days later, there was a commitment of 28 countries on energy efficiency. There was not a single headline on that. And Italian economy is based on energy efficiency. We have tons of little PMEs in the northern Italy working on the technology of energy transition. So this would much more benefit discussion on that. Instead, we talk about something which is, doesn't exist at the moment in our strategy. So I think that's something like an example that shows the narrative of that. Going to your question, which also today is the day of the youth, so it makes much more sense to discuss that. We need to think about that the youth today, someone that was born after 2000 is born in a crisis. So they have a perception which is very different, the perception that my white beard, the people with white beard like me have, which have born in the other centuries. So I think they have a perspective which is very different. We need to look at the fact that, unfortunately, if you look at the Italian example, for instance, these people do not vote yet, or the majority of people that go to the polls,
But they will vote.
they will vote. But the people that have the economic opportunity to make the change, they are not there yet. If I have to renew my house, unfortunately, it's not a millennial that is going to renew its house. It's someone that does not have this kind of perception of the crisis that they have. So I think they're very important to highlight to the elders that if we not do something now, the climate crisis becomes a climate catastrophe. And that's going to be too late for doing something efficient in the future.
Thank you. And then talking about Ecomondo, how long have you been organizing the events?
26 ago, we have the idea that waste is not a problem, but is a resource. You can imagine that 26 years ago was a concept, a very, very innovative concept, because, you know, there was a lot of emergency, the waste in Naples, the waste in Milan, the waste in Rome, and Italy really didn't do nothing for waste. And so from the beginning, we have the awareness that we can do something for young generation, but also for the industries, because Ecomondo is really, I think, the best example in the world, and not only in Europe, where innovation have a place to explain what really the strongness of innovation in terms of the green economy. So the green economy is very large because you have soil generation, waste, water, and energy efficiency, services, artificial intelligence applied to waste. So you have a very, very big range of sectors. But the concept is waste as resources and not waste as an emergency. And the other pillars was information, training, and good communication. In the last edition, we host a forum on the responsible communication in cooperation with the Ministry of Energy Security, of Environmental and Energy Security, and with FERPI. And the Global Alliance of Journalists want to ask for the 18 goals. We have 16 goals in 2030 agenda, and they want to ask for 18th goal regarding the responsibility communication, because this is really an important topic also in the realization of the transition, a right transition, a just transition. So I think that all together, I repeat, because Ecomondo is a platform, is a place where different private, public companies and stakeholders have to cooperate together for a good common, and the transition is really difficult to reach, but we are, I repeat, I am optimism. I think that we are on the right street, the right way, and we can back. It's impossible to come back from, yes,
ecological transition.
Yes.
Alessandro Macina is still there.
Yes. Here I am.
I'm live. So talking about communication and journalists, and basically every day you talk with this kind of issue, the debunking fake news. Is there something journalists can do in order to communicate in a better way?
Yes, of course, the role of the media is so important in clarify, in clear the debate, the discussion, the storytelling. We are responsible also for the storytelling, no, we are doing about climate change, about ecological transition. Yes, so I think for me is very important always to do to do the speech of of science. So let's give voice to the scientists. They are the experts, and let's try also to translate to big audience their message when it's not even so clear. But scientists, it's 30 years they are doing really a big effort to explain us, no? The situation, the problem, all the effects we are moving to, the effects of climate change. So, voice to the scientists. Also, study of course, study a lot as a journalist, because as also Andrea said very well, this is not only an environmental issue, is a whole society, economy, health, also health issue. And I think the role of the journalist is also to collect all of these things together, and so not, as Andrea very well said, not only talk about climate, also find new perspectives for talking about it, and always do construct a good constructive speech without mentioning opportunities, solution, and the fact that maybe a better, more sustainable world, of course, it's possible. It's not a dream. It's our reality. And it must be our future.
So Alessandro, last question. Running out of time. Avoiding negationism, avoiding denial. What to do in a few words? It's difficult in few words, but
well, I don't have an answer probably to that. What I can say to strengthen the role of youth on this day, we should discuss about youth, is that we need to ask the right questions. For me today, the right question is: do the youth, do we provide the youth with the right skills for the green economy and for the future jobs? Do we think that now we're giving that, or we are giving them false solutions and skills that will not be needed in the future markets? And so that's, I think, the main question that we need to ask for the future of the youth today.
This is the big question, and I think we are going to live with this question to be answered in the future. So thank you to Alessandro Macina, remotely reporter from RAI, Andrea Ghianda from Eco Think Tank, and Alessandra Astolfi from Eco Mondo. So thank you, and bye.